now exactly 11 o'clock. Are we online, Johannes?
Hey, person, we good to go?
We are good to go. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricardo Mackenzie. Welcome to the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works and to the deliberation on the Western Cape Adjustment Appropriations Bill B3 of 2022. This morning, we only have the one item on the agenda, which is the consideration of the bill. I have not received any apologies. Can I ask the members to introduce themselves, please?
Good morning, Chair. Derek America, member of the committee.
Thank you very much, Member America.
Morning, Chair. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen.
Morning, Chairperson. Sean August, member of the committee.
Thank you, Member
Morning,
August.
Chairperson, and to the rest of the other members and the staff that are present. I'm Lulama Mvimbi, member of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wimby. No other member. I know my team working with me today is Mfundo and Johannes. They're working our team in Parliament. Thank you for being here. I'm going to ask the Minister and his team to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, Chairperson. I think we're ministers, not minister.
Ministers.
Tasha Simmers, Provincial Minister of Infrastructure. Thank you.
Minister Mitchell.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning.
See, Minister Mitchell is driving, so his connection might be. But you are, yes, sir, that's fine. HOD.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee, MECs, Jackie Gooch, Head of Department of Transport and Public Works. I do have members of the team in the meeting with me, and I'm not certain, Chair, if you want each one to introduce themselves or whether perhaps if they are responding to any question that they then introduce themselves.
I think let's introduce themselves so we know who's here.
Sure. So, colleagues, if I could just ask if we could run down the list in alphabetical order. CFO.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Chantal Smith. I'm the CFO of the Department of Transport and Public Works.
Gavin.
Good morning, Chair. Gavin Code, DDG Public Works.
Gerrit.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning. Gerrit van Skalkwijk, Head of Strategy, Department of Transport and Public Works.
Len.
Good morning, everyone and Chair. My name is Len Fury. I'm Head of Roads.
Then Shafida.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Shafida Andrews, Chief Director, Financial Management.
Good morning. I'm sitting with Shafida at the moment, Kyle Reineke, DDG Transport Management.
Good morning, Rivka van der Voort, Deputy Director, Management Accounting.
Good morning, Mujahid Solomons, Deputy Director, Management Accounting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair. I think
that
that's
seems
our
like
team.
everyone. Thank you, colleagues. We've been around for the last 23 months, I think, during COVID, so it'll be superfluous for me to introduce going through all the rules around online meetings. You all know that. So what we'll do is we go straight into the vote. I'm just going to ask any of the Minister Mitchell or Summers if you want to say anything before we go through the actual adjustment budget.
Chairperson, from my side, once again, as you've stated, we are here to engage you on the adjustment budget for vote 10. And as such, I'm looking forward to engagement. I know what my colleague, Minister Mitchell, wants to say. Thank you very much.
I know Mr. Mitchell is driving, so his signal might be bad. But colleagues, we have received the actual document. You were present when the document was delivered. We're doing vote 10 adjustment budget, vote page number 231 up to page number 267. But what I'd like to do is, HOD Gooch has indicated she has a presentation. I've circulated that presentation to the members. I think for ease of time, if we can go through that presentation and then members can pose their questions to the team once the HOD Gooch and the team has gone through the presentation.
Chair, thank you very much. Let me then just make sure that I'm able to share my screen. Just get it up here.
There you are.
Yeah, and if I could just clarify and check, Chair, would you mind if I turn my camera off just to make sure that the bandwidth is acceptable?
Perfect. You can do that.
Thank you very much. And you can see the presentation.
Yeah, I'll also put mine off.
Thank you kindly. Chair, the presentation is hopefully quite short and relatively self-explanatory, and it aims just to cover the key elements of the adjustments budget. Of course, certainly it doesn't go into the detail that is found within the documents that were tabled through the Provincial Treasury. But as a starting point, just to give a summary to the committee, the main appropriation of our vote increases by just over 324 million rand, or 3.56%. So it goes from 9.1 billion to 9.4 billion. And the table that you see is what is reflected on page 231 of the adjustments appropriation, where it provides an indication of the split between the 6 budget programs of the department. The committee will see that the largest gain, if I could put it that way, is in relation to Program 4, the Transport Operations Program, where based upon funds from increased own revenue as well as revenue retention, there is just over 102 million rand being directed to the shortfall in the direct costs of the GIPTN, so the George Integrated Public Transport Network. And that's understandable given the fact that the National Department provides the Public Transport Network grant, but there are certain direct operational expenditures that that grant does not cover, which therefore need to be funded through other means, as well as then for the development, data management and warehousing costs in relation to the integrated transport hub that the committee has had shared before, the outcomes of that, where we see the work and the input into our transport systems, the provincial traffic management and law enforcement teams as well. Then 41 million comes from a rollover from the last financial year, split in 2 parts for the COVID-19 transport and facility response. So that was the red dot response that was still continuing in the early parts of this financial year. It seems to be far gone in everybody's memory, but actually was still there for a few months of the current financial year, as well as then for the public transport safety improvements that we're looking at in partnership with the City of Cape Town. And 40 million or so from a number of programs that you will see there to further provide for the integrated transport hub, and then the final amount of 11 million that is being shifted to support a rationalization process of reviewing the Golden Arrow bus service operations, given the need for them to cut kilometres as a result of limited funds from the public transport operations grant and the province not being able to top that up. Then there's additional funding that comes into public works infrastructure into program 2, of which 28.9 million for rounding of figures comes for capital projects, the development and the operational costs related to our eMerge asset management system, and then also the refurbishment linked to the education building, as well as then parts of the COVID-19 facility response. We've received just shy of 4 million from vote 6 from the Department of Health for the leasing of the Boerland FET College, operational costs for the use of Brackengate as an intermediate care facility, and then also some costs relating to the replacement of their EMS, Emergency Medical Services head office. Acquisition, of course, is something that the committee should be aware of, comes in every year in the adjustments budget. The funds that are held in reserve by the Provincial Treasury are allocated in the adjustments budget process on the basis of the acquisition of properties for the Departments of Health and Education purposes. And then 38 million from the revenue retention from last financial year to support the eMerge integrated asset and project management systems. You'll see some funding allocated as well to Transport Regulation Program 5, 8 million there, particularly for uniforms and equipment for additional traffic law enforcement officers, particularly coming in for those that graduate at the end of this calendar year and are taken up into the Provincial Traffic Law Enforcement team. And then an overarching figure of about 40.6 million from increased own revenue, and that comes in to pay for them for the increased motor vehicle license agency fees, cost pressures, and so on in transport regulation. Moving on, the other adjustments that you'll see in terms of the shifting of funds between votes that's carried through into this process is 6.3 million is transferred from vote 10 to vote 1 to the Department of the Premier for the staff of the Office of the Minister of Mobility. So as indicated and known, the Ministry of Mobility was created in the in vote 1 in the Department of the Premier, and therefore those funds need to be shifted to vote 1. We've received, I've already mentioned holistically the amounts coming from the Department of Health, but it just breaks them down in some more detail. And then we are receiving some funds from the equitable share from for Program 1 administration, and that's 4 million to support the organizational refresh integration processes between our department and the Department of Human Settlements. Public Works infrastructure, the 25.5, that's the acquisition funds that come in, and then a further 2 million coming for Program 4 around the design of a transport voucher system for responding to youth unemployment. Then from self-financing, so this is as a result of increased own revenue in the current financial year. So we anticipate increasing own revenue in the current financial year, as well as then the revenue retention from last year. And that is then split. I've mentioned some of it and provided you with a little bit more detail for the GIPTN, for the transport, provincial transport legislation, and the relevant and associated regulations. 7.6 million, as we've said, for the transport hub, and that links to the phase 4A rollout of the GIPTN, and then 5 million linked to the provincial sustainable transport program. Under transport operations, I mentioned the money that has been allocated there, and you will see just shy of 27 million, which is the agency fees that are payable to municipalities, registering authorities as they collect increased revenue, because the motor vehicle license fees were increased from the 1st of September by an average of 4.5%. Moving on to the revenue retention, and to give a sense to the Standing Committee of where the 97.2 million in the main has been allocated in relation to revenue retention. 15.5 million or so, or just over 15 million, has been allocated for the development of the asset management practice models linked to our asset information management system, as well as then the eMerge program. There's 10 million that comes to Program 3, that's roads or transport infrastructure from the Drakensberg municipality as one of their contributions towards the upgrading of Main Road 201. Then I've already mentioned the inputs to transport operations and to transport regulation, 8 million there for the uniforms and equipment for the traffic law enforcement officers. Then, Chair, coming towards the end of the presentation, just one or two more slides left, the realignment of the provincial budget. There was a shifting of just below 5 million rand from Provincial Public Works. It's earmarked funding for maintenance to child and youth care centres, and that's been shifted to the next financial year based upon the cash flows of the work that is underway. So that has been shifted just into the new financial year. Then, Chair, the final one in terms of the rollovers. So the money for the child and youth care facilities that has come through for social development from last financial year into this financial year, 15.8 million rand. Then there was also 2.7 going into the Public Works program for the upgrading of the Rusper Street office accommodation that has been completed and opened by Minister Simmers. The refurbishment of the education building, 2.2 million. And then you see the minor amounts for the quarantine and isolation facilities, as well as then the operational costs and development for Emerge. Under transport infrastructure, the three rollovers that you see, 2.7 million for going to Drakenstein for the Berg River Boulevard Phase 2 upgrade, 23.5 million to Witzenberg for the Series van Breda Bridge upgrade, and then the 4.5 million for the Stellenbosch municipality in relation to the Adamtas and Helsgehoogte intersections. And then again, the last rollovers that have previously been listed under 20 million rand for the program 4 transport operations. So that's specifically the red dot for the balance of the COVID response. So that was picking up March, April, and May before red dot was closed and shut down. And then the 21 million that had been provided for as a transfer to the City of Cape Town in relation to public transport safety that comes over into the current financial year's budget for that particular purpose. Chair, that is the end of the brief presentation. I certainly didn't want to take up the committee's time. It's just really to give you a sense of the core numbers that you find within the adjustments budget. That will give you a sense of the main shifts and allocations that have been provided for. And we're happy to answer any questions of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll hand over to questions from the members. While the members start thinking, can I just ask a question? The 25 million rand that was that's allocated from own revenue for the new education infrastructure, is that a transfer from, I'm just trying to understand that circle, is there a transfer from the education department to you, or is there an allocation from treasury to you for a project for education? I'm just trying to understand that flow of things there. And then I see a member, Wimby's hand is up, and then member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much to the HOD for the very brief and straight to the point presentation. Just maybe one or two, couple of questions just for clarity's sake. Maybe it might also assist me in making some proposals. I think during when we're sitting for the annual reports, I think one of the issues I've seen in the statements there that were made, especially by the HOD and I think as well as by the ministers, was the issue of the use of funding for purposes of identifying not only infrastructure, but identifying land or properties for purposes of social or economic integration and transformation. So I will really expect that when we start doing some adjustment, maybe that to be as a start. But I haven't seen or haven't heard them mentioning any kind of funding that is allocated towards that purpose. I might have missed that out. I would like to check whether are there any funds that have been allocated for such purposes of identifying land, properties, and buildings right through the province for purposes of socio-economic development and transformation. But then on more direct issues, now that was just a general one, Chairperson, just on more direct issues, I see there has been, maybe before I get to the direct one, when I look at the presentation, there seems to be really nothing that has been put specifically for the minibus taxi industry, either by way of assisting them in various ways, but you will see there is money made available for the Go George, and obviously there will be money for the My City, and there is also money for Golden Arrows as well in various forms, but there is nothing specifically I could see and hear that this is specifically for the minibus taxi industry. I'm raising it in the context that I think there is 40 million for Red Dots, which is actually being a rollover, but to my understanding, Red Dot has been kind of stopped or jettisoned, is no longer going to take place. Couldn't some of that money be used productively for purposes of assisting them one way or the other? That's one area of money. But also, I've seen there's an amount for, I think it's also about 40 or 41 million for Safely Home project, which is a project that also even during our annual report, we said we'd like to have kind of a full brief on it. Maybe isn't that some of the money that can be used for purposes of also assisting towards the minibus taxi industry? The last one, Chair, I wanted to raise is that I see there is an amount, I think on the last slide, but unfortunately the slide you sent to us, Chairperson, it just cut certain pieces. I couldn't see it. It was not on the slide you sent us, but on the HOD slide, there is an amount of 21 million, which is a rollover for safety of the city of Cape Town. I think it's an amount of 21 million. Now, is there any similar money that is allocated for other regions? I just want to stop there, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you're talking about the 21 million is the public transport safety, but yes, I think the HOD can respond to that. Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just regarding some of these transfers, for example, to the project in Ceres, the Van Breda Bridge, if I could just get an indication of how that work is progressing and whether that amount has already been spent. Same with the Adam Tas Helshoogte intersection in Stellenbosch. And then if we could get some more detail regarding the 6.3 million to the Office of the Minister of Mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the HOD Gooch. Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you very much. And through you to the members, thank you for the questions. Just as a heads up, I will ask Mr. Fourie if he's able to respond to the specific questions in relation to the Van Breda Bridge status, as well as the Stellenbosch allocation. And I may very well call on some friends around some of the other responses. And through you, Chair, if you're comfortable, they're not necessarily all going to be responded to exactly in order, but really just more as my brain is putting the pieces together. But in the first one, to your question, if I've understood you correctly, you're referring to the 25 or so million that was allocated for the acquisition of properties, both for health and for education. Am I correct? So that money is held by the provincial treasury in the provincial revenue fund, and then allocated to us in the adjustments budget. Historically, there used to be money put into the baseline, but as you're aware, purchasing of properties or acquisition of properties can take different timeframes, and therefore we potentially land up with a risk of underspending when the money is put into the baseline from the beginning of the financial year, and therefore it comes in the adjustments based upon us knowing that these are the ones that we can finalize the acquisition for in the course of the year. So it's held by the Treasury in the Revenue Fund. I trust that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. Yeah.
Then the next question, which is the first one through your chair from Member Mvimbi about the economic and socio-economic transformation, spatial transformation. There is money in the budget. So you would recall in the main budget, there's funds allocated into public works planning, particularly for projects of this nature. But there is no need for us to do any adjustments to that funding. That's why you don't see it in the adjustments budget. So there is money in the main budget for projects of that particular nature and the assessment of them around properties, what some of the partnerships are, etc., that you would have seen in the annual report, as well as, of course, in the main budget that was done for 2022-23. So it's just that there's no need for us to make any adjustments to those allocations. There's sufficient money appropriately allocated in that respect in the original budget. Then your second question through you, Chair, in relation to the minibus taxi industry. So let me perhaps just for correction indicate that there's no funding in this budget that goes to my city. Transport and Public Works Vote 10 does not fund the My City in any way. That's a City of Cape Town and National Department of Transport funding. GABS that's indicated in here, GABS is not being funded directly. The reference that I've made was in relation to an adjustment allocation for us to understand how routes and trips are going to be rationalized as a result of a reduction in services because the public transport operations grant is insufficient to be able to cover the operations that are required, and therefore there are going to be reductions in services. And so the rationalization process is a study to determine which are the best ones or the ones that would have potentially the least impact in order for us to be able to go through a process like that. So that's not money that's going to Golden Arrow, that is being spent by our department for a study in that regard. The red dot funding that you see here is to pay for the services that we needed to pay for when the service was still operational. So the March operations, of course, are paid for in April. So it was the payment that was required in April, in May, and then when the service concluded in May, it was March, April, and May in terms of the services, so through to June. And that's the funds that are required. There was no provision specifically made in the budget because you'd recall that the manner in which the Treasury approached funding for COVID-19 was to allocate within a year and to understand, because we were uncertain and there were so many variables to consider, what was then not spent in the previous financial year was then brought across and the application made for rollover to be able to pay the final accounts and operations in the current financial year. So there isn't money that was allocated for Red Dot that remains unspent. The money that's going into the budget from the rollover is to pay for operations and for services that had been rendered. So in other words, we've paid for it. It's now to make good and make sure that it's all appropriately funded and allocated within the budget. The rollover that you're asking for about the safety side of things with the City of Cape Town, that is a committee, I'm sure you will recall previous conversations where we had attacks on buses. There were concerns, and there was originally, you would recall, a presentation made to the Standing Committee where we were looking at putting in place a response team, a law enforcement team in partnership between ourselves, the city, and at that point it was Golden Arrow. Golden Arrow withdrew from that process. The committee would recall that particular presentation, and then it instead has shifted to say that this is public transport safety. And so the unit that is going to be set up with ourselves and the City of Cape Town is around public transport and public transport response and safety overall. That's what that 21 million will now be directed for. So yes, that's within the metro context and doesn't move into other areas. Certainly part of the reason why we're trying to increase the focus through the provincial traffic and the law enforcement team on the provincial side is also to be able to give a footprint and a response beyond the metro area. As you're aware, our provincial traffic team do deploy to other parts of the province to be able to respond when necessary on a number of the public transport priority matters, in partnership with SAPS and the municipalities where need be. So for the minibus taxi industry, about anything specific, of course, in the main budget, we do have the allocation where we support the Santaco, the Western Cape Santaco. That is there as a stock standard allocation where we provide support to them. And there are other initiatives and some training and so on that is there. There isn't anything on top of what was in the main budget that's coming through in the adjustment side of things. So there's nothing going in additionally into the adjustments. On the Safely Home, I I wasn't, of course, in the annual report session, but I did get some feedback from the team about the request from the committee around more detail. And so certainly the team are ready and willing to be able to provide a presentation through to the committee around the overall Safely Home program. Particularly in this instance, what would be perhaps useful and interesting and why there is funding going to it is that we've done detailed surveys around the pedestrians and pedestrian movements. As you know, over 50% of our fatalities on our roads are pedestrians. And therefore, for us to be able to respond and understand what the types of programs are that we need to implement in order to try to reduce that number and to safeguard pedestrians, we needed to do some very detailed work, surveys and research, which is what the team have done. And we would be willing and very eager to share those results with the committee and what that then means for some interventions and potential approaches to responding to that specific need. And that's why there is a focus within the department overall called Safely Home, but it's more than just a communication. It's around the research, it's around the detail and the operational responses. Chair, I will end off with the last question that was posed by, through you, Chair, Member van der Westhuizen, before I ask Mr. Fourie to pick up on the two roads questions, and that was around the 6.3 million for the Office of the MEC of Mobility. So because vote 10 now has got, Minister Simmers is the executive authority of vote 10, and Minister Simmers, as the Minister of Infrastructure, his ministry has continued to be funded through the ministry allocation that sits in, I think it's vote 8, human settlements. By implication, then the vote 10 that contained a ministry budget. We no longer have the Minister of Transport and Public Works, but a Minister of Mobility, and therefore that ministry needs to be funded. And the budget, therefore, is just being moved. What would have been used and spent for the Minister of Transport and Public Works is then allocated and shifted to vote 1, the Department of the Premier, for the Office of the Minister of Mobility. So it's really just moving the allocation to a different vote in order to pay for the Minister of Mobility and his office. So through you, Chair, if you're comfortable, I'll ask Mr. Fourie just to pick up on the two questions, the one posed about the Van Breda Bridge and the sense of the progress. I think that particular project is run by the municipality, and then whether Stellenbosch has claimed the amount in relation to the Adam Tuss side of things. Through you, Chair, to Len.
Thank you, Mr. Fourie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as the head of department says, the Ceres project, both these projects, obviously municipal projects for which they claim subsidy, are the municipalities' projects and not our own, so they manage it. So I'm not so quite up to date with exactly where the Van Breda Bridge stand, and I couldn't quickly phone a friend because the friends are all in the municipality. But as far as I'm aware, they are on the go. The reason why the amounts were rolled over is because they started very late in the previous financial year, but they did start. And then this year they are basically in full swing. And the expected end date for the project, I think, is around the middle of next year, 23, then it will be finished. As far as the Stellenbosch projects are concerned, we have received a letter from the municipality claiming the subsidy, and they have indicated that they've done the work that they were supposed to do and can provide the proof therefore, and will obviously then claim their subsidy. And that's basically all I can say.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that responses. It's much appreciated. Colleagues, I guess there's no further hands up. So was there anything else from the minister or any of the two ministers who want to add?
Chairperson, nothing from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Mitchell.
Very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And to the team, thank you very much for presenting yourself and the two ministers and the technical officials. You're now excused. You'll have to have coffee in your own offices because you're not here. And yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. Much appreciated. And Jafida can put in 2 extra sugars.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you and
colleagues.
goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chair. Bye.
Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, having listened to the explanations, I would like to propose that we support these adjustments.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. I appreciate it. Do we have a secondant?
Yes, Chair, it's Derek America. I'd like to support the motion that we support the budget.
Thank you very much. So there's something, okay. So given that we have, is there anyone that would like to express a different view or not to support the vote?
Yes, Chairperson, can we, in terms of Rule 90, record the minority view not to support the budget?
Thank you very much. Will be so noted. Anybody else? No one else. Thank you. Colleagues, and we're going to put the draft report off. So we did ask members if they're in agreement or support or not. I did receive members on support. The minority view was noted. Sorry, Member America.
Chairperson, I wanted to recommend that we adopt the report. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm just going to read the draft report that can as indicated, because that is the support as we got from the Standing Committee members. The report from the Standing Committee of Transport would read as follows. The report of Standing Committee of Transport, vote 10, in terms of the schedule to the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill 3 of 2020, dated today's date, 28th of November 2022, will then read as follows. The Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works, having deliberated on the subject of vote 10, Transport and Public Works in the schedule to the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill B3 of 2022, referred to the committee in accordance with the Standing Rule of 188, reports that the Standing Committee supports the bill. In accordance with Rule 90, Member Wimby of the ANC indicated they expressed a minority view and they does not support the bill. No other views has been recorded, so this will be the official report of the Standing Committee of Transport and Public Works as of today. And I got already a vote for support from Member America. Do I have a secondment of the report?
Indeed, I propose that I will second the proposal that this report be sent through. Thank you.
Thank you. There's therefore confirmation that the report is.
I can take
the
report as well.
Thank you, Member Wimby. Also agree that this is a true reflection of the meeting, and this report is therefore adopted and will be sent to accordingly to the House. Can we go to the minutes of the 22nd of November, please, colleagues? You all were present on that day. I can see that there. You can go down to page 2. Member Kondlo stood in for Member Wimby. You can go down.
Chairperson, you noted Mackenzie with the small K.
I've noticed it. I know. I specifically looked at it. I didn't want to say anything. Thank you very much. We can go down. Thank you. That's, yeah. You can go down, Member 2. Thank you. Member America, I see your hand is up.
Chairperson, I move that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you. Member America has accepted that we adopt the minutes as is. Do we have a seconder for the minutes as is?
Support.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. That is a true reflection of what happened on the day. And colleagues, that brings us to the end of this meeting. Any resolutions, I presume, from members?
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. So resolution as well. We'll note the resolution call. Thank you. Thank you, members. This meeting is therefore adjourned. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations.
Thank you, and thank you.